깨지 제인도와
도도 제
당아조 대리 가서 티제 두지 레기 빠르와
랭아 말베 리시
알레
레기를 랭아리
제발로 사실
제 디 어레 나서
문제
디 리시 바딩 nga만에 차스
알았어.
랭아 바르웨
레돌라
다 공제 들이 가르치기 누나 코아기 시엔테서 코알 시엔 뭐고 히보지 예레스
대비요 왜
아니
대비요
코이기 시엔테서 케기인스 난 코알 시엔 예제 강가게 토야 예 말이데
쟤네,
다
쟤네.
시엔 체체데서 케기인스
나서
닌도와
돌라
대반 대배 폰통 치와 동스 나도 가수 동어 도마 인주네 코아 난 시온제 진디 니바 해준 심반제스 데 카르라게 라두 코아 데라 시엔 모부 히보지 예레스 애닌 코아게 시엔데서 하코야 데 같이 보레스 코이 시엔데서 하코나 애닌 코아데 이구인도 삼소노 된 코투기레스 애닌 코아 이구 소노 데 만코와이나 애닌 코알 타이그 투제 데 존 레기 마레스 데발라나 자볼 라기에르 자보 데발라나 페 미미 다 미 좀본다 보지 라이에르 세상 코알라 다 가르가르 예르라나 동어 데페 퐁스 두로와 페 미시 히보지 게 댕켄지 예르스타 기 예나 니 예나 송데 게 댕켄다 보로와 페 데바 체부게 애니 강가 테데와 제네 히로와 나론소 되게 강가 애니 내 나위게 강가 애니 게보 차위게 강가 제네 라소바 소고 농라 소소게 도보동 텐데나요 만테베게 강가 테나요 두제 주림보 찰 데미비 강가 제네 동아 뇽 만데나 동아 뇽아 동아 몸보 뇽아 차와 그 동아 다 동의 동아 센터보다 유네스 동아 강가 오사기 차와다 된 코아레스 세존다 쇼완제스 둔 코아데 페미시 강가 쳔보인바 아니 야보 마이바 코아데라 다 갈세고르고 셈바 팡그레스 아니 코아데 야보레 무두 썸노 코그레스 다 닌주 글로데 셰그레스 걔네 코안디기 니바 다 카게지 헤기스 오네 몸보지 레기레스 애니 룰루 조롱 기테스 녜구그레스 가서는 코이기 시엔데서 마니에나 코아데 이구기도 코아데 뽕군도 삼 닌주 글로 레나세이션 마인드 델레투기 마리스 데 말레바 이나이니 코야 뽕야기 레가트스 시기마 데 용종 코알은 코는 코이 동아데서 뇽데 그해서 다든데 기치에 니바 몸보 예스 라긴도
Hey, so hello everyone. Welcome to this session of teachings on the Letter to a Friend by Nagajuna. So we'll start right off with verse number 65, where Nagarjuna is speaking about the problems with samsara, or the faults of samsara. The verse reads, "O gentle sir, to make your disenchantment grow with the samsara, source of many pains, desires frustrated, death, ill health, old age, please heed its defects, even just a few." So what is this saying? Well, in this verse, Nagarjuna is explaining how samsara has many problems, it has many faults, and it's important to know those, to recognize them as being faults. Because if we do so, if we know the faults of samsara, then we'll be able to have this thought of wanting to be free of samsara. Without that thought, then one will never give rise to that sort of idea, that notion of wanting to be free of samsara. So the verse starts with gentle sir, and that's a very respectful way of addressing the king, Deche Zampo, by Nagarjuna. And so the verse speaks of desires being frustrated. Actually, desire, it ruins us. Wanting one thing means that we want two things and three things, and it never actually ends. Samsara involves, from being born to getting older. We have so many different kinds of problems. We have the problem of, for instance, suffering, though we don't want to suffer. We may meet friends in a restaurant, and then we'll have the suffering of accidentally spending way too much time in a restaurant. Or we'll have the suffering of not meeting any friends and feeling lonely. Or we have the suffering of feeling too hot, or the suffering of feeling too cold. So it's endless. And actually, the root of all suffering is samsara. This is the source where it all comes from. So it says, make your disenchantment grow. We have to feel some sense of sadness about the state of samsara, of cyclic existence. We have to recognize how it's not something good. We should feel disenchanted with it. And so this ties in with the point of how we have to generate this mind of renunciation. And so Nagarjuna says, source of many pains, desires frustrated, death, ill health, old age. Please heed its defects, even just a few. So now, King, I'll tell you about what the problems, what the defects of samsara are. So that's what's going to come in the section below. So without knowing those, again, we won't have renunciation mind, and without that, without the thought of wanting to be free from samsara, we'll continue to circle in samsara and we'll continue to suffer.
그래서 다 까담빌라마 대수긴 코알라 시엔 침보니 예레스 가르라나 애니 메타파도 동하와티레 라바리.
The Kadampa Lamas used to say that there are two big problems with samsara, which is that it's impermanent and that it's painful.
디인두다 가르스구르고 까담빌라마 로르 통바 도나바 코아기 시엔 대수 콜라 소노 똥셰셰네 애니 콘 돈나포 차손 라로와 다데인두 나조 근코기 시엔 대수 소노 똥시두 까담빌라마 로르 통바 도나바 기 소노 똥와 노신실레 똥셰바이나 데는 나조 인중길로데 레네 애니 치 둥케도 콜 타그두 두성그 소노 콘케스토데 애니 차이 코가 예바레셀라기.
So we mentioned how there was the Kadampa Lama, Langretamba Donakpa, the Lama with the black face. So meaning one who never smiles. He never smiled, actually. He became black-faced because he was always thinking about the problems of samsara. And so if we can also reflect deeply on the faults of samsara just like him, then we'll really have the chance to become an authentic Dharma practitioner, someone who truly, from the depths of their hearts, want to be free of samsara.
세상 코와 세들 시행 희보지에 봐. 강가 희보지에 봐. 그 손노트에서 많고 와이나 코알라 타 구인도 선비게 손노 민주 세데 레기 마레스 제전 점비용. 코알 키나 니바 면세. 코알 가보시나 민주로 레기 마레스 라바로.
So this is also something that Manjushri mentioned, how samsara has many problems. And if you don't think about this, you will never have renunciation. You will never have the wish to be free. So it is taught then in the teaching parting from the four attachments that if you are attached to samsara, you don't have renunciation.
세상 지도 논중아 론초 치바 야부지 차구이에 치 존데기 손노데 레구이에나 코아이게 강가데솔 손노 용주 동지데 단 nengo 치보지 차기에리 마도 애닌 코아데 강가 희보 예와지레샤 코아데 자부 두적게 땡콘다부지레샤 상아그레건 나이즈데 가도 조투기에 말이 데조 마토나 애닌 코아데 유군도 좀 손노데 코르투기 말이 애니 데손노데 메나 코야 유야길레가 치 게와시알라소바 나데소 조기 말와
Normally, actually, we can think about if we really would like to be Dharma practitioners, to think about the faults of samsara again and again is a crucial point. Without this recognition that samsara is just like a prison, a cell in a prison, we won't do the work of actually getting free from samsara. We won't get that wish.
pena tabandabuji zoguna inchi menchi nipala njui tsuringilo de gugira ngenjun sele koa de kanga hibuji risha tan koal tagu ndusambik sono te kushene tabazo gugire mato tabazo gobayena ani mise chela lelhabu ndusambandabo yona tabazo gobayena ngala kanga jiri kanga de meba chosa resang tabazo yandabo tende shena ani ta tabazo don yabuti gone tabazo yase chogi marise ke de yerwa nonju soje chondin de hindoa te sonola.
If one is thinking to become a monk, then one absolutely needs renunciation. One needs to have a foundation in this wish to be free of samsara. If one thinks to become a monk because it'll be easy to earn a living, or thinking, oh, in my normal life, I have some problems, and maybe if I become a monk, those problems will go away. That's not a good way of thinking if you want to become a monk.
Right way, Mari.
Is not the right way. And this is what the Buddha mentioned in the Vinaya teachings.
Ta ngaronso chiba zogunayo koala gabu meba cha chene ene chiba zogu yerwa tendele ayo magawa che soso ge lega chibo doyala magawa che ta tendek chene shigu yerwa chezo tan koa ge kolsono to ya den nengo chibo cho yer ta chiba ngune zo sona.
If we want to be a real Dhamma practitioner, then we need to dislike samsara. We need to stop liking being so infatuated with just this life, with our own work, with our own purpose in this particular life. So then thinking of samsara, thinking of the problems with samsara is a really important task for a real Dharma practitioner, if you want to be a real Dharma practitioner.
chezo tan deso des kole labo yerwa yinayo tendo mombu kibundo wa ani ngune tone ta nga kowa pon toba ji zogu gindu kowa pon to ya ge sonu ji ngaro ji la le gusare sone tende interest da bo yena dan de so kolo sonu yon tong gu gindu wa.
So these following verses can seem pretty straightforward, easy to understand, but there's a lot of meaning within them. And if we really have this interest, thinking that I want to become free, I want to get out of samsara, then it's important to be reminded of these and to think about them again and again, these following points.
Chesan ta jabo gi la sonwa ludu gi jabo la sonwa tan koi gi shen kanga he tu gi ma yina ka he gi he yin eni chorong anjo gi nyero ji se la undu tan koi shen ni ba de he yin la ba da tan koi gi shen ni ba de detail shen he yin elin tela non sen da mu da dum tsam ji yeris ta tin tombo enin koala Nipan de tempo de junior maris. Tendek koala shenji yere se de he yin la wari dande saje doju relupa te tije doju relupa te pani puni mani chumani sheo danju wado hin ni tong doba ni de chiwe tele to koa na nibanga manchi se la indoa. Ta kasi gurgo ngaron so nonjun jite na da se yanda bo ni se yanda bo topo se yanda bo tene yerwa da tele magawa she topo tele gabu she yanda bo tene yerwa ta tende shide te sola cho se hiro ye maris topo ina kadu ina topo cho tele ngeba ye maris tega no she da ina kadu ina ko da jo de ngeba ye maris koa gi che te sola ngeba junu tembo junu ye maris benas 단다 파인기데 후마 부청기든데 예리스 단다 아마인기데 후마 소소기 쨈메 청긴다고 든데 예리스 내가 노시 단다 소소기 다인 댕기데 마오바 소소기 파만다고 벤존다고 로보 야간다고 든데 저기리스 단다 부인 댕기데 후마 파청도하다고 단다 파인기데 후마 부 청도한다고 또 단다 로보인기데 후마 다 청도하라서 왔다 든데 예리스 세상 코아도는 이번가 만지세도 코순 코안데라 땡땡다고 예바 치지요 예 말이스 강가 땡보 메반다고 조조를 되이리스 세상 대솔로 손노 동시에네 아니 나기 년자 있어야다고 기부 잡아서 거야 예 말이스 아니 나기 다 있을 기부 동보서 거야 예 말이스 땡보 주는 예 말이스 대소 단 거기 기시에 지리스 라바
Nagajuna mentioned in the previous verse to the king that I'm not going to tell you all of the problems, all of the faults with samsara, but I'm going to tell you a few. And so now we come to the second fault of samsara, the second problem. And this second fault is described in a little bit more detail. And it's divided into 7 points. And we're now coming to the first, which is how samsara is not certain. It's not reliable in that sense. So verse number 66 then reads, men who have fathered sons in turn are sons, and mothers likewise daughters. Bitter foes turn into friends. The converse too is true. Because of this, samsara is never sure. In the world, in our worldly lives, we have what's called enemies and friends. And we tend to dislike our enemies and like our friends. That's how we do it. But friends do not always stay friends, and enemies don't always stay enemies. There are people who have been friends and who then turn into enemies. And there are also enemies that we might have met at some point who then turn out to be friends. So there's no stability. Someone who is a father to a son can then, after he passes away, be born as his own son's son. And a mother can become her own child's daughter. So we see how enemies become friends, friends become enemies, fathers become sons, mothers become daughters, and vice versa as well. There's no certainty in samsara, there's no stability. So, thinking about this, reflecting on these points, we should think to ourselves that actually my close ones, my relatives and friends, and my enemies, these categories are not so fixed. It's not that important to affix so much importance to them because it's not stable.
Apen soso pamanda ina tatete ko gabo shiku saji chogirwa soso ki chi duchwa ke luten te tebarwa. Ta yin penjo senda niece nephew brother senda wotisol hiro attach zogu yase ye mare la yer. Kasna teso lay gone shungo chores. Ti jena kozo choron ki plan linki res. Ta kozo la mombute gugirwa. Sheza hiro chaba shene pe misi kozo do kata ma pe wada wote so shia ye mare. Teso tempo kan ye mare se la yer ta luduk. Ta topo ina taro oze yeris, topo de choice shene shunris. She's no layer wate. Ta tende res nesu teso hia yere. Ta konje papa kanda yana sengi ji shunro kon kalo longal ndone eni tomba ji la kong nesu ji tonro eni kon koa se ya tende res ya se kon gemo khoro kare tonre la na miji gi pugu ji koronge ponku la ga eni nyagi khaji sa eni taken down la chichi gi ruba ji sa tende deirwa eni kog karen tonre la na papa kada yana gi koronge pon la ga jute ngima ge koronge daote anda koronge pugu chone ta ta chibu hibu ji shiriye ba eni koronge sa de nyate ngima koronge ta paji ama ge insarwa ama ge kha ene koronge karse ruba sangi chidela ke ta juba shune kanga tegunda te koronge ama de chodendwa chezo ta tendenda wo jires koa seete ene kada ya kon gemu khosons chezo danda nga zon koa de tende jires tetong dan dabo ji chosong ari dandande chezo ta hiro ta ekaj zoya ge giba junse mundus te jabu choron ha ko gugires lawar.
When we think about our parents, then that might be slightly a separate case because our parents are the ones who gave us this support, this body that allows us to practice Dharma. So therefore, we really need to be especially kind to them and love them. But our other relatives, like our nieces, brothers, sisters, cousins, they are actually just connected to us by karma. So that relationship is maybe not so stable. It's not something that we should place so much importance to, that we cannot bear to be separated with them or something like that. Friends are also a little bit different because friendships are something that we form, that we engage in through choice. So it's not just past life karma that bring us together with friends. Now, there is a story from a sutra about the noble Katyayana. who was once walking along the road and came to a village where he saw something that made him burst out into laughter about the state of samsara. And what he saw was he saw a man holding a child, a young child, on his lap, treating the child very well. And he was eating the meat of a fish. And he was throwing the bones on the ground. And there was a dog uh, gnawing on the bones, eating the bones. And he was trying to chase away the dog with a stick. And so Katyayana, when he saw this, he started laughing because for him, what he saw was that in a past life, the child had been this man's worst enemy, and now he's treating the child very well. And the fish that he's eating was nyadi palare amalare.
Takarere lanan riye sare.
Laza,
Pala lanan riye sare.
laza. The fish was the man's father from a previous life. And the dog who was beside him eating the bones, chewing on the bones, that was his mother from a previous life who was beating off with a stick.
Cheme de sade rupa te cheme
La,
moro ki choga ki rupa res.
ale, oh, conta. Actually, it was the spouse. The fish was the no, sorry, ki.
Mare mare. Tikin dang la cheme ji ki rupa sane ki yuba khuso rupa de chi sanki taking previous ki husband ki rupa.
La, so it appears, yeah, the dog who was eating the bones was eating the bones of his spouse from a previous life, right? Of his partner. So this is how samsara is, actually. This is how relationships shift and change all the time. And so it's not something to be too attached to, actually. There are no good reasons for being so attached to samsara. This is what you should come to recognize, O king. This is what Nagajuna says.
Tante soso ki sono tona eni tendo desu koya ji yero wa ta nyonyo ki tone. Tene kase tanda ando gende chibi ki lagi ndo wa. Popo do pupanjo nyenza desu soso kanga yedu roba shingi le shewa ena eni yabori te legi maris te male na eni zombili mi kanga chorong ki panjo yi chorong ke topo yi na yo eni kaya ye maris. Shezang hiro 이지야 예 말해서 라긴도 같아서 깨자 정보로 와.
So sila panjo yodu tene miten so gi ropa yonga chegere. Te mena tene suyan yongi mares de
소소로 깡가 저도 로바 신기데 도보도 년자를 라예래.
la
깡가 저도 도보도 년자 돼서 싫어 통야 예 말이다. 제가 다 소소 깡가 저도 돼서 매나 점블리 미 깡가 저는 그 년자 있나요? 가야 쳐야 예 말이라.
la so. So Amdo Gendun Chapel would mention that if we have some money and fame, then it seems as if friends and family are willing to help us. But when we run into problems, when we are facing some really serious problems, then these same relatives and friends are nowhere to be seen. So actually, the world is not so reliable that we might think.
다 근데를 해서 당군에 그 당우마대로 와. 당우마대 녀몽바대로 와. 두숨보대. 마도 나존 지den기 다도 다 응원하시나 다 말어와. 다때서 나부리 다때 마케는 디그리 치돈 튼데레.
We can also think about enemies. The real enemy is the negative emotions, the three poisons. Outer enemies in the world are actually not such a big deal.
Number soje ba gida kare res nge zundu ignoring de ngaro so gida res la indwa te ngune demba khibo jirwa.
We could say that the enemy in Buddhism is ignorance. That's really true, actually, if you think about it.
Tan ko gi shen ndamunda don yebi no la nipa ngamba me bi shen se jiris ko la ngamba me sena simba me ba satisfaction chaya me jo shen ji yiris ta de he yirda tije tuju reden sarwa rere janso gine haba yi Oma tunde tadu soso yi shi u jisun drawing kowa we dewe chemo niji tunza los. Tante so tete le la wanda ure ta kar se durwa nga zon koi gi nondula shewa lene ama ge uma de hibon tunye res. Ani ama ge uma de kase tunye tonka da ji ja shewa ina ani tonka je toya mecho tende ji shunye res. Senje rere ki tunga jo uma de Rira show gina yebiki janso gile lock umaji ngazo tunza res denge ane taro yo ngazo koala thai gileka maje dambichi madu ane noi she migewa she dena ane ngama tunza wa tele lo double triple tende uman tunne ane koala dene kanga nyoga so tende nesute ta yeres chezo tende imba yindu and deso ha kowa she ne jabu deshi zombo choronke eni ta taba toya gilega shiguris kowa le taya gilega shiguris labar ta tendo.
Now, out of the 7 faults of samsara, we get to fault number 2, which is that there's no satisfaction in samsara. Verse 67 reads, "Know that every being has drunk more milk than all the 4 great oceans could contain, and still, by emulating common folk, they'll circle, drinking evermore." This is a pretty straightforward verse. It says, throughout all of our lives, since beginning this time, we have drunk a lot of milk from our mothers, such that it cannot even be calculated. Each sentient being, if you take all of it together throughout all of their lives, they have drunk more milk than could be contained in all the 4 great oceans. And if we don't reach liberation from samsara, if we stay distracted, stay engaged in non-virtue, we'll drink even more than that, maybe even double or triple. So, O King, we need to put forth effort. We need to work hard to become free. That's the meaning of the verse.
Tate la yer tendong taro yo ngazo roa ngazo milu yabuji to lama yabuji te ene chi shia lojong shia koka to ta chi shia la tujin kanga ye ene ngajin me tende rene chi maze ne dedewa ina chi madu ne taro yo koa la lea la sosu shio tesu gilaga le chong je yanda bo ene ji mil ngoko to yanda bo ene ji thado shi yanda bo densen shi yanda bo penjol gabu shi yanda bo sosu lula gabu shi yanda shete wa ina tan koa le shi ya le de tonga ji to me ji ungiri da se yanda bo ji in derek ko ya zo yirta
all of us have a good physical body, the support for practicing the Dharma. We have met good lamas, and we have the opportunity to practice the Dharma. So actually, if we have all of the conditions, yet still don't practice, but just do the normal worldly things like doing business, tricking and cheating other people, getting jealous, getting competitive, getting angry, if we just spend our time trying to get rich, or whatever else goal we might have, then samsara will have no end. That's the indirect meaning that we can take from this verse.
Pena ocean web no shin rewa. Nazo koya tag laga de maje waina, and koala yonjole uma tune ocean web no shin. Ocean web de ti dona ti ko ledo degindo. That tende ron choya res yerta.
It's like waves on the ocean. If we ourselves don't make that effort of becoming free, of getting out, then ocean waves are going to keep coming. And so it says in the verse, right? They'll circle, drinking ever more and more. It just keeps going if you don't put forth effort to get out.
Dan ko shen sumba de, ta koala shen ji gaisana, so lu yonjo lu yo ne, yon lu saba lengua, yon lu yu ne, yon lu saba lengua, so ta hiwo tende ji shen ji yere la barita. Tije tanda tuju reje ba hi tsikong tombo nyingke, koi shen sumba de he, ne tsikong shima nyingke, koi shen yiba de he, shene. Koi shen sumba de lu pe misi mombo lengua. Lu ji yu yon yonjo lu ji lengua, tende ki niba ji yeres. Eni tije tsikong tama nibo de ke, karsego, ama ge nga ne yonjo shewa lengua ki shen tende yeres. Tati keje so he gindoa, re dani rubi pumbo ne, lumbo nyamba shi jin denju te sele, tate shen sumba de he gindoa. Senche re ge, kol sono tong sheba ina, nganje kwa la shewa kase len yewa ti ke ruba yerwa. Ruba teso pumbum dabo ji ya pung shewa ina, ri jabo rira do nyamba noshin, darong tele loban dabo tende ji chosaris. Shezang, ta pena hina sabunda shivu ji chosandoa. Te indu, ene kwa taya gilega maje wa ina, te dadong yung, ane pe hina chayan doyan dabo jiri daasi. Ta deki koi shen sumba de hierwa. Tene mai tadu jagu tsigu zang rupu tongcho sayi lommelin se deki, ane mai ngan yonjo shewa lingua de la, ta tongka daji jago ina, ane tongka yung je toya mejo ji yer daasi. Pena ngazo hin jahu laya jiri, ta jahu laya de ngazo huba lagiri, huba. Huba gendebu shinto ji yere wa, tima nonshinji, tido nonshinji. Tido nonshin zone, ane mai ngali shewa kase linye wa de tongka jeze shewa ina ta, zombi lingi sasha teso kanga, dimba ki tsu shene, rubu di shene, tongka jeze shena yung, ane mandong wanda wuji ta, ngazo mai ngane shewa linya so tendek nesu shunye res. Shezan ta tadu yung, sono yaboji mandong ne, chin rabo yaboji maje, kwa la taiga laga de maje yawa ina, ane tele loji tendek nesu chaya jiride yerese. Tadi keje de here ta.
Now we come to the third fault, which is that samsara has one fault, in that we have to be born again and again. And for that, we have to take new bodies each time. Each time we're born, we have to get a new body. And here in verse number 68, the first two lines talk about how we take so many bodies and how that's in itself a problem. And then the last two lines talk about how we are born from a mother's womb. We have had so many mothers again and again. Each successive life, we have a new mother. And so the verse then reads, a heap of all the bones each being has left would reach to Meru's top or even higher. To count one's mother's lineage with pills the size of berries, the earth would not suffice. So it says here in the first two lines that if you think about each sentient being, they have taken so many births in samsara that if you take all the bones from all the bodies they have had throughout all of their lifetimes and pile them up, it's going to be higher than the king of all mountains, Mount Meru. This is very frightening to think about, actually, such a huge pile of bones. And the message of the verse is that if we don't reach liberation from samsara, it'll get even worse. There'll be even more bones. And then the last two lines talk about how to be born again and again throughout samsara in this way, each time there is a mother. And basically, if we try to count how many mothers we have had, it's actually impossible. So we could imagine, for example, taking a small berry from this particular type of tree. Now I'm blanking on the English name. It's shukpa in Tibetan. But anyways, you can imagine these small berries. If you try to place one berry for each mother you've had throughout all of your lives, then even the Earth's surface wouldn't actually be enough to count all of the mothers that we've had. And then the idea is, right, if we don't try to get free from samsara, this process will simply keep on going.
And huba hudo de magi tonka jea de soje jamdin de hindo la hegiris la yero.
So this example of counting the mothers of our previous lives with the berry from this particular type of tree is something that the Buddha mentioned in a sutra.
Da tije donju pahi tiniyo koi gi sien ngabade chanza tembu chogiri chanza mawi chogiris jowa hibuji ndogiris tende koi sien ji yeris teche yesare jajin jite chewe chunene leji ongi sien sati nung kolo juja nidu chune chon kowa tawdo yonre nidu njose la yindoa sheza chanza da nga zo pe misi tembo kosa tembo ju chenbo ju shubo oncha chebo pe lai umbo jaji no shin dawo cha ya ka koka tende yeba yo chanza pe ma tombo mi chuma chondo ya ndabo ta metabo kol he yer tarwa pe na lai umbo jaji se te jite pa ki do kucha do cheba shisa we do we late so kyo and kuku shisa respecta zo tende jeres ta tende ji chao ne di ki longshe de so zo she ne yon leji on ki shin sa ti lu se du lendo gin le nyon ju ki le se ya jirta te ki gon yon ko mi ji lumba le ne la yu ne any mi chu ma cha yon na nyawa da bo le tendeke yon kanga chongi yeris. Sezon ta tembo ye maris. Dega noje oncology jabu seyaji lin yila onshi tonkin tendeji cha. Yon lendong yinla nyonji le tendek gone koa pa cha koa lonla dushu yobo dushu de cha ndo yaso tendeki ta yeris. Tapena ngaronzo nyima de khane ani nune ndogin doa. Ani ngazo pambo cha ne yon ma michuma chogin doa. Ngazo komba de yao zi ne yon ma lu ndogin doa. Ta tendenda nesu chochong ride yeris. Shezang ta koa la cho se shiro ye maris. Taba tembo se ye maris. Ta tende hako guguris. Ani koa la himba lo guguris. Ta ti keje tsu he yesar.
Now we come to the next verse that speaks about the next fault, the fifth fault of sometimes in samsara we're high and sometimes we're low. And so the verse reads, Indra, universally revered, will fall again to earth through action's force. And he who ruled the universe as king will be a slave within samsara's wheel. Sometimes in samsara, we may reach a really high position. We may be wealthy and powerful, like the king of the gods, Indra. And then again, we may revert to becoming just a normal person. So this verse is talking about impermanence. Now, Indra is someone who not just ordinary worldly beings, but even the gods respect. But through action's force, it says, he will fall again to earth. Because of the power of karma, even someone like Indra will have to fall down to earth, which we can understand as maybe the human realm or even the hell realm. So there's no certainty in samsara. It's not reliable. It's also like he who ruled the universe as king, like a Chakravartin king who controls the four continents, essentially the whole universe. That very same king may be reborn as the lowest kind of servant, the servant of a servant, or the slave of a slave in the wheel of samsara. So basically, this speaks to something that we all experience. After having been the leader or the boss, we can again become just a normal person. That's how it is. So actually, samsara is useless. This circling around and around has no point. There's no permanence. There's no stability. It's not reliable. So basically, we have to lose our appetite for samsara.
Chezo tan deso de peden jani de papas ndabu de koa la himba lo ne koa ponde ge lo de ngaronso gitala liwi tendol de gindoa.
La.
Ngazon der tanda gindoa koa la shen de ye de la ya deso papas ndabu geba ndabu de koa de la himba lo ne koa ponde ge lo nginju se de ngaronso tsala le ya le tendol de geroa. Ninju se de ne eni ngazo chi zonke de chak yero ta tesoro junsen ngoma tesoro ta.
Now, the reason that these points are brought up, the purpose is to get rid of our attachment for samsara. Thinking about these faults of samsara, we should be able to generate a sense of renunciation. Because renunciation is actually the starting point of becoming a Dharma practitioner.
다 티제 돈주 단지 빠테시 가르세 플라리 시네 유림부 바둘라 대와 몸보뇽 셰바이나요 데솔라요 이체한다고 가요 매바 꼴디 용 거의 그 강아인 바시 예로와 토리 부문 너마케 발라스 레베 대와 유리뇨네 라스 냐와 타제 웨베 퉁콜지스 레바 힌두 미제 텐살로스네 다 토리 부문 너마케 바스 토리스나 플라이들 코스마리다 플라이 lumba la 예베기 보모 teso chala la greda pomo gi nomado keba do kaina teso labage reshe tende shene tat chowa dea tende le yerwa ta lo pena lo jala swa padul tende le chowa le peshe ton shene yon lindong gela nyon yu le la swa tende gi gone ko nyawa le ne tende nyawa denjang sene rekhena sabu nyingi paro la tune kanga nyogo andabo Tini yo ti napo nyawa tino sele ti je don churula soba jane yo sole ki cheba ki donga nyogwa. Yo pe misi galse gurugo. Sencha tende shu yo na shakino tsabu ki so jaya la soba. Tende gone ta donga sonji michaba nyogwa ki nesu tende ta yeris ta. Shezon ta tende yeba de eni jabu choron ha koguris. Tini Layu le suaye na yo ha le guya kanye maris koyo mita baris kola shen chimbo yeris mita bigi inki koyo shen de yeris eni teso ngotse ba shiguris la yer.
Next verse speaks about how, although one may be born in a God realm and have a lot of pleasures for a very long time, there's no sense in really believing in these, trusting these kinds of pleasures. So the verse reads, "For ages it was rapture to caress the lovely breasts and waists of heaven's maids. Now one will bear the terrible caress, the crush, the slash and tear of hell's machine." So what this is talking about is that in what it says here, heaven, this refers to the God realms. There are these maids, these girls in heaven whose breasts and waists, their bodies are very pleasurable to touch. But even if one has experienced that for something like 100 years, again, because of the power of karma, one will fall from heaven and be born somewhere else, somewhere like the hell realms. And there, instead of this very pleasurable, pleasant sensation, one has to be subjected to the pain of being cut by a weapon, like in the black line hell, or the pain of having one's flesh ripped out and eaten by some kind of fearsome bird. So the message here, the meaning of the verse is that heaven, the God realms, they're impermanent. They're still within samsara and they still have these faults.
Tanda leki gone yonju nyawa legi rese leki yerwa nonju ngazo gile te la sonshe yerwa tongche nyonju gile shene nyonju gile lendo yenle nyonju gile se she yerwa tanda de lendo yenle nyonju gile ti onke eni koma nyawa le ala soba resele lendo yenle nyonju gile del kogu yer ta tsocha
Lasa dip le sumbudip Sedi, Chine,
통
Nyonggoya,
통신
Tene,
용주 레라 나로와
La,
쳔딜라 레데기 네브 쳔딜 대가론 랭기 있던데 지예리 딜라 통신 용주 글레스
Laza,
시엔네 용주 글레라나 단다 레존에 마오바 용 용한 줘야지 시엘레 용주 글레스 아니 렌동 길레 용아세도 시에와 카게 기질라요 레디기 노미 민주에 쪽 레지라 아니 렌동 길레 용주 레스 라이키 님반 제트솔라
Laza. So here, just a clarification regarding what kind of karma it is that makes one be born in a hell realm after having been born in the God realm. That's something called karma to be experienced in a different lifetime. And so there are three kinds of karma that are explained in this context, in texts like the Abhidharma Kosha. One is karma where the result is experienced in this life. So you do something and then you experience the result in that life. Another is karma, the result of which is experienced after one birth. So after having passed away, and then in the next life, the result will appear. And then there's the third kind, which is karma, which is experienced in a different lifetime. So the time span may be uncertain, but it will nonetheless be experienced at some point in the future, after a few lifetimes or further.
다 시동으로와 라이게 네트에서 다 네야보리스 코알롱라 코이기 네야쇼 사자 야쇼 lumba 야쇼 라보테 라이기 lumba리스 이나요 텔라요 이치엔다 가요에 마리스 티케제 데히인도요 티케 돈주 단지 바히 콤베 레베 네바 데세바 lumbu pola 요리 네네네 라요 메무 로냐 조아이 동어 메세 포뇨 기차로스 라긴도와 다 데카라기르세도 테네 라이 그 룸바테 룸바 야쇼레스 코이기 노라 야쇼 임비 존세 가르세나 페미시 소파 시트 야보 노신다보지 예레스타 소파 시트 야보 예나 코마 데나 양 파기로와 아니 바르 조볼로 깡가테기 마라 컴퓨터부 키오지 예로다 다 텔라나 디사르와 컴퓨터부 키오지 예레스 라이 룸바데 다 텐데 인두 테네 라 순주 자송 그 라네테 소세 예레 순주 자송 라네세 야지 헤 예로다 겐번제테 존롱라 베나 투가도 겐트로 온지 세다보다 근데 예리다 데비 관계 라네테 소세 예리다 아니 손주자수 라네 롬보스나다 손주자수 라네테 졸라 아니 라유도 주림보 근데 대신에 아니 라유기 에다 롱셰자도 롱셰네 소와 데볼라서 야라 근데 대신에 요 레지 고네 라용세두 근데 냐왈 마룽그레스 냐와 녀코 냐와 근데 롱그레스 메마도 로냐슬타 냐와 녀코 근데 예르와 녀코 냐와 세제르타 다때 녀코 냐와들 시동고 논주 나돌 현저 히보예나 베나 부민다부질 현저 히보예나 디기 레티기 고네 녀코 냐와들 렌도 예레 테니 강가 몸부 태기예레 데 동가 몸부 히오지 뇨야 그던데 네수야 예레스 세존타 코이기 치 가나 이나 가레 이나 가레를 롱셰나 이치 요야지 준이에 말이다스 다디케제 데히긴도와 다디리
Laza,
데솔 데와키로 제우야문두
Laza. So in general, it's taught that within samsara, the God realms are good, actually. They're the best there is within samsara. But even that is not reliable. That's the message of this next verse. And so the verse reads, "For years you might have stayed on Meru's crest, delighting as it yielded underfoot. But think now of the torment that will strike, to wade through glowing coals and rotten flesh." Again, the God realm is the best. It has the most comfort. You could say that it has very nice sofa seats, where when you sit down, they sort of bounce up, or they, adjust according to your body. So everything is extremely comfortable and pleasant. So there's something also called the heaven of the 33, Trayastrimsha heaven, which is talked about in the Abhidharma Kosha, which is the realm of the gods of the desire realm. One might stay there for a very long time and enjoy all the things that are there to be enjoyed. But then again, due to the force of karma, we will have to be born in the hell realms. And here it talks about, but think now of the torment that will strike, to wade through glowing coals and rotten flesh. These particular hell realms are called the neighboring hells. And these are the hell realms that we'll be born in if we have had a lot of desire in particular.
다 티제 돈주 대니 바시 영 토리 본문 디키 가와동 넘반 제사 셈바 제네라 다마라드 라자 네노지 공로 나와 나제 도반주스 단데 카르라그스 두요 순주 짜슨 그 하네 테솔라 가든 몸보 예를라레 가든 셰무차 가든 세한다보 넘반 제비 가든 세한다보로와 가든 튼데 몸보 예사로와다 다 가든 테솔라든 하이기 보모 단 제마 몸보 예레스 다 테소 찰리 제모 제 튼데 시시시네 셰네요 데와지 토야 예레와스 텔라요 타바템보 간예 마리스 요 레지 고네 냐와 레그스 냐와 간데 레글나 다요 닌코 냐와 튼데 지 레네 테네 가르스 그루고 요 강가 히오진 트레기리스 파타 데두 나 노신 야부 히오지 예바 임발라 테네 군네 셴나 나 마이 바 라드그 소르데 예바 테네 테소 룽기 테데 농가네 마 룽네 ene sozo ki komba laba na kanga chene tende ki donga nyoa gwa nesu lendo yaso tende yeris shezo ta teso kanga taba temonda ye maris ta tende ke yezar.
Now, in verse number 72, it talks about how those who in the joyous garden played and in beauty's grove were served by heaven's maids will come to woods of trees with sword-like leaves and cut their hands and feet, their ears and nose. This is talking about how this realm that we just mentioned, the heaven of the 33, has a lot of gardens, a lot of beautiful places like Beauty's Grove and other kinds of places, right? And there are also these heavenly maids, these beautiful girls from the god realms. And it's possible to have a lot of bliss and pleasure, sort of just roaming around there and playing, but it's not reliable. Again, we'll have to be born in hell realms. For example, in a certain hell realm, there's something which at a distance looks like a very nice forest, but actually, when you get closer, it's a forest where all the leaves on the trees are sharp razors. And when you try to walk through that forest, then, as the verse says, you will cut your hands, cut your feet, and ears and nose. So the message again is that the pleasures of the higher realms are not reliable.
Don't you dance on pa? Don't you dance on pa here? Lamo teso gichala tu jala tendeshene. Any deva toya teso la yo taba tempo kanye marise kekeje kegindoa. Taji papa rai pomone donze seji pema dehune. Layo nyawa cho rame pa. Sagan zelo chose njucha lo se. Ta zimbu taji baba se yero ta de chunso ki miro. Zimbu taji baba se ya de chu yelo jedon demba seleta chu pe misi chu yabo pio mini watanda wotende ta kole dinda munda je yejo tuna toala mene dimba la mene zubulu yabo chawa da zanda tende ki chunso ji ki nona tene lai pomo tezo tene lai pomo pe misi don zebo yeba ke nyimbo yeba do yabo yeba tezo ene chunso tele medo pe makha dewa tende nona de shene ta tuje tende nyale chi shigirwa ta ina yo tuze ji zone leji ong gone kase gurugo nyawa le ndurs nyawa kande ji nyawa chanya tasenji cho ra me baseleta ra me basede kase du pena ngazo janzo ne pakal ndoguna ra yena ngazo pada ndo tugirwa ra mena ngazo ndoya ye man ndo tugimarwa ra ji tsagurwa ta ra mejo gichu sabu shiwoji gnu le ne ene ta lula lu shene donga mumbo nyogo yazo tonde nesu unya yeres chezo ta teso la yo hiro kasu yichi andabo ta tende ye maris cho goyanda ye mas believe yanda kan ye maris nimbo meba tende jires ta de la yere
Det tamati rab mebar lana di le pa gel
ngazo pena ngazo pando gunarwa
oh,
janso ne pando guna rade gugirwa rame rasana pe misi tirimbo ye na rame bare
alelas. Now, verse number 73 talks about how even bathing, swimming with the goddesses in the god realms, that's also not something reliable. So, verse number 73 reads, among the golden lotuses and lovely maids, they bathe in heaven's gently flowing pool, but into hell's own waters will they plunge, the scalding, caustic river none can ford. So this verse is talking about how there's something called the gently flowing pool, which is a pool of water, which is extremely pure. It's water which possesses 8 different qualities. So you could call it a kind of pure mineral water with 8 supreme qualities, like how it doesn't hurt the liver, it doesn't hurt the kidneys, and it's extremely healthy. It's good for the body. And there are also these goddesses there who are extremely beautiful, and there are golden lotuses as well. So it's a very pleasant situation. But after some time, after having experienced all of the pleasures that this situation can offer you, you'll be born in a hell realm. in one of the hot hells, for example, where there's something called the river none can ford, meaning that it's a river that's so deep that no one can cross it, and its water is salty. That's what it means with caustic, and it's scaldingly hot. So it's extremely painful.
That Tanda Teso Giroa, Ndepi Kangi Lai, Lumba Teso Le Sunayon, Tendeki Deva Teso La, Yichia Meju Keja de Hieroa, Tandine, Tije Dunju, Dangiba Deki, Kang Kongma Ke, Lai Lumba Lewaina, Digi Deva Teso Layon, Yichia Mebi Keja Teso Hiendoa. Klayu Dede Shindu Chimbo Dons, Sony Choda Deva Tonne Las, Nami Mi Buki Chuba is, Donga Jumicheba Tensa Los Leta, that like Luten to like Shewa Len Shewa ina, Telayo, Yichiandabo, Taba Tembo da Kanye Maris, Tike the Hegere, Klayu Sedu, that like Lumba, Tada do Gentro Onsu Seleta, Kan Komag Lateso, La Lechene. Ene Zunzewa Trinimbo da Kimba sea Debi Yed Engal Longshe Shele, but Deva Chimbo Dende Toyanda Boton. Tega Noche, any Sonten Tombo La Shewa Longshene, Jenin Debi Kang Kangale Tane, Yo Sunjusasun Lane Dewaji Toya Yeris, Teso Lion Da Yichia Maris, Yo Naginako Legi Gone, Teso name Nyawa Nami Sazalindone, Nyawa Namiki Meki. Puhino she saw shene any donga nyone kanga chogoyaso, tende donga jum sheba di nyogayaso, tende genesu teso ungires, shezon da tende res lava.
In the next verse, verse number 74, it talks about, again, how the higher realms are also not reliable. And the verse reads, a Kamaloka god, one gains such bliss as Brahma, bliss that's free from all desire. But know that after that comes constant pain, as firewood one feeds Avicii's flames. Actually, taking birth in a god realm, taking that kind of God's physical support as our body is not something reliable, is not something we really can place our trust in. It's not permanent at all. If you are born there, then there will certainly be pleasant form, pleasant smell, taste, texture to be experienced, but it doesn't last. There's something called the heaven of the 33, where one can be born, which is a very wonderful place. But still, it's not something we can actually put our trust in, because after this, without fail, one will take another birth. And then one might be born in the Avicii hell realm, the lowest and most terrible region of the hell realms. And one might turn into firewood that fuels the unrelenting fires of that hell realm, and then be burned alive for a very long time.
That teacher don't you tang about till can any goyaro. Nima dawa nito ronluchis, vegingine tado no shetis, layumuna maru shine, shichune, rongilaba, jomba tomunjuse. That like lu de tone, yo 이시 시야 maybe 깨자 인도 준세 인도지 해 인도아 다 니마도 다와게 라세야 근데 예로다 라이프 니마도 라이프 다와세야 보는데 시와테서 또네 근데 소소 그 zubola 왜 그거 예리라 말다 라차나 라이프 니마도 다와서 시와는 근데 제때 리기 라소와 강가 논통기 기회 외전체 보던데 예리스 이나요 요 렌도 길레뇨 렌다 보던데 지기 고네 다 가서 그 니마도 다와기 왜 메사 니마도 다와기 왜 포사 메사 문어 마루 히보지레네 아니 소소게 콤바 라바제소 파종아도 수 꼬알라서 봤던데 몬통미기 내수 근데 저야 안 좋아하기 때문에 요 강가 예리스 근데 라 셔버리다
Now we'll cover verse number 75 and then we'll finish for this session. So verse number 75 reads, "One who was reborn as sun or moon, whose body's light lit whole worlds far below, will then arrive in states of darkest gloom. His outstretched hands will be invisible." This verse describes how, after having gotten this body of a god, again, there are further reasons why this situation is not reliable, why it cannot be trusted. Because even the gods of the sun and the moon, the Devaputra of the sun and the Devaputra of the moon, even in this situation, though one has this amazing body, which is extremely radiant, which has light coming out from it, which can illuminate the whole world, is not reliable. Through karma, one might be born in a place where there's no light at all, or no light can reach, where even if you just try to stretch your own hand out in front of yourself, you won't be able to see it. That's how dark it is.
아 데린데 가서 그 코이기 셴 셰기라서 코아기 셴데 도 두두도 아니 제바 셰기스 도 두두 셰네 제바 셰라 아니 ndamda don tamba yeresele 셰두 나바 그 꼴데 뭐뭐 셰서 나바 그 꼴데라 치제 뭐뭐 셰서 치제 조지 레구네 단다 돈주 다이기 발라 돈주 땡하기 발라 아니 셰기르다 거의 셴가바데 다 토메인 로기를 따바템보 예 말세야 되게 바르다 기는 거의 셴 두바데서 손이 셰야린도아
Vasa. So now in this session, we've been going over the faults of samsara. And first, it was covered just in brief. And then we launched into this more extensive explanation in 7 points. And the fifth point is what took the most time. So we spent from verse 69 until now 75 on this fifth point, on how the fifth fault of samsara is, which is that it's not reliable or permanent. And then we'll discuss the sixth fault in samsara in our next session.
인도 까담빌라마 대송은 코알라 셴니에 메타바도 동아레세야데 따도 코알렌 투긴도아
Now, this perfectly allows us to understand this point that the Kadampa Lamas talk about how samsara has two problems or two faults.
라소 애니 텔라로 다 제마 제마 사데 데즈나 산데 존은 디로
ngala keba mendo ngaso Saturday chena digre.
Okay, yeah, okay. Tuze jibala, yeah. Tatwa kare.
So we'll meet next time on Saturday. And I see there's a question. So, will one always fall from heaven to hell realm, to a hell realm, or can one be born as a human or an animal as well?
Ta tanda chidong ko hun chogiro wa. Ngeson son kare ina tanda lendong yen le nyon ju gi le te tsawal go ne. Ani ludu ki branch nyawa don ani nyawa tsanya te zul shigiri se la yindo wa.
In general, it could happen that one is born as another type of being in any of the um, lower realms. But yeah, in these particular verses, Nagajuna is bringing up the branch hells and the hot hells as the examples for what kind of suffering one will
Ta
experience.
tanda dodo da wo de kare shigi le na ro wa. Kowa ge lumba kawa le chimba ina dewa ye maris. Mitapa re, donga res, kowa la cho ye maris. Ti kowa de te ye sari ta tanda la nda monda mboji he de te.
Basically, the meaning is just this: wherever you go in samsara, wherever place you end up in, it's always going to be impermanent and painful. So it's useless. That's the essence.
Ta pena nga zo hlai lumba le na yu yi chia me ba. Ka nga choya ye ba ina. Tini me lumba le na do. Ka nga choya yi ba re se nda boji kotu giro wa.
So we can understand how if we really hammer in this point that the God realm cannot be trusted, it's not something reliable, then of course the human realm is also not reliable. There's going to be problems in the human realm too.
Ta
Tiwa
de re
shenta
sho.
kache shidu. Ngazo di shumala chena yamena tandara
Tanda shenan de re.
ngazo. Okay, so some other questions. If repeated rebirth is one of the faults of samsara, then in what sense can liberated beings be said to return for the benefit of sentient beings without contradicting liberation itself? So, korwaki kyonshik di kiwa yang yang lengwa di chagirwa. Then ini tarpa top sanyo ki kiwa tenso kiwa yang yang len nangirwa.
Te keje kagare.
Laza.
Taba to sangi de zon koa le shewa le ya de ome go ne shewa le gi mara ron ye bi to ne shewa le gi ro. Nga zo ome ba ron me bi go ne lenye go ne shewa le gi ro de kagare.
That case is a little bit different because those who have already attained liberation, they don't have to take rebirth. They do so out of their own choice. We, on the other hand, take uh, births again and again helplessly without choice. And then, if samsara is something to be renounced, then in what sense can its suffering also serve as a condition for generating bodhicitta and strengthening the aspiration for enlightenment? Korwadi ta wanashina pangoyashik chagiyores, pangja chagiyores, teni tarong korwaki dunga sayade, tene chanchuki sem kia ki kien rabochik chagiyosere, tene suzuki chanchu tobyaki menlam koram, shuk yagi tonyaki kien rabochik chagiyosere di kande inas.
Koa pongo ya rindu la ya de demba res. Ani kowa ge kanga teso la tenne shonki sen jil shianda wo tende zogi esares te zogi res donga te la yede mombo yeres donga yena ani nije yeba chao gires donga yena soso porat meba chao gires donga yena ani diba migewa muzo ke gewa zonke chao gires donga la yede mombo yeres.
Yeah, I think that's true. Samsara does need to be renounced, but it's also true that the suffering in samsara can be used to generate bodhicitta. That's true. We even say sometimes that suffering has many good qualities, which is that if you suffer, then you can improve your compassion. If you suffer, that can help you get rid of pride. And if you suffer, you can use that experience to help yourself avoid non-virtue and practice virtue instead.
Gewa la gisundua donga mena ngenju mes donga le quality yeri langite gewa la re.
So Shantideva says actually regarding this point that without suffering, there's no renunciation. So suffering are these heaven and hell realms real or metaphors for our experiences? Di nyawa tang tene hlai yul se di ngoy so kurang nyam so nyoy yorbes yamana di pe da bujik chag yores nanso ki nyam nyam.
Ta tanda ngesu yeba no chi yere.
In this text right now, it's being explained as if it's something we actually do experience in reality.
Ka nyawa do layu ko ngune mena ro. Tine nga zo hiye de na cho mundua. Nomba soje ba kele yero.
If there were no, actual hell realms or heaven realms to be experienced, then there wouldn't be much point to have these discussions we're having right now. So that's kind of the basis for these discussions. That's what Buddhists accept, basically.
Ludu ke nyawa do layu teso yeba yego shene kejan teso hiye yero.
So that's the foundation for Nagajuna's whole discourse here. He takes that as the assumption, and then he launches into this kind of discussion. Oh, yeah. Okay. So thank you, everyone. And
Thank you.
Thank you, Kempola, Olaf, once again. See you next Saturday.
yes,
Have a great weekend.
have a great weekend. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.